Step away from the vehicle with your hands visible." The command echoed across the gas station lot as Officer Ethan Blackwood slammed his patrol car door, his long-sleeved uniform giving him an authoritative silhouette in the midday sun. Amara Johnson had been reaching for her wallet when the cruiser screeched into the station, and now her red jacket seemed to glow under the bright overhead lights as she slowly raised her hands. "She's going for something," Officer Lisa Campbell shouted from behind the car, though Amara Johnson's movements had been nothing but deliberate and calm. "Ma'am, get down on the ground." Now, Officer Ethan Blackwood's voice cracked with adrenaline he didn't need to feel. Amara Johnson's voice remained steady as she complied, her knees touching the hot asphalt. "Officers, I'm just trying to pay for gas. My wallet is in my jacket pocket." She had no way of knowing that 5 states away, motion sensors on her husband's desk had just detected his phone buzzing with an emergency alert that would bring the full weight of the U.S. military down on this small-town gas station within minutes. Welcome to Frost Folk Tales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. She was on her way back from the community center board meeting. One day, she stopped for a fill-up at Fletcher's gas station, located on Highway 47. The afternoon sun was harsh, and the bright lights above displayed the scene in all its detail to all watching. Ethan Blackwood, officer of the law, strode toward us with a hand resting on his weapon. His pale face bore a strong flush. Too strong, I thought. "Sorry, ma'am, but we got reports of suspicious activity here. Someone fitting your description has been seen." His words formed a story in the air, as if made of smoke. A story that wasn't there just before. Amara Johnson kept her voice calm and measured, drawing on years of community leadership experience. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Amara Johnson. I live at 1247 Oak Ridge Drive, and I was just stopping for gas on my way home from a board meeting. My identification is in my wallet, in my jacket pocket." "May I reach for it slowly?" "Don't move," Officer Lisa Campbell barked, circling around the patrol car with her own hand positioned defensively. "We'll decide when you can move." "She's acting nervous, Ethan. Look at how she's sweating." The irony wasn't lost on Amara Johnson that her perspiration came from being forced to lie on hot asphalt under the blazing sun while wearing a red jacket and blue jeans. The absurdity of the situation began to transform her initial confusion into something sharper, more focused. Inside the gas station, Donna Fletcher pressed her face against the window, her middle-aged features twisted with concern as she watched the scene unfold. She had been working at this station for 12 years and had served Amara Johnson countless times. The woman on the ground wasn't a criminal. She was a respected community leader, married to someone important in the military, though Donna Fletcher couldn't quite remember the details. The voice of Officer Ethan Blackwood crackled over the radio. "Dispatch, I need additional units to Fletcher's Gas on Highway 47. I spotted a guy acting suspiciously near a car. May have been intoxicated/messed up." Amara Johnson's eyes lit up with genuine displeasure for the first time since this interaction began. "The officer's statement is incorrect. I haven't had a drink or drugs. I am totally sober. I was just reaching for my wallet to pay for my gas. You can watch the footage of the security cameras over there." She turned her head to the very visible cameras under the station roof. The mention of security footage seemed to agitate Officer Lisa Campbell, who moved closer to Amara Johnson. "I smell alcohol on your breath, ma'am. We're going to need to search your vehicle for open containers and possible contraband." She didn't wait for consent before heading toward Amara Johnson's pristine sedan. "You don't have consent to search my vehicle," Amara Johnson stated firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and respected. "Under the Fourth Amendment, You need probable cause or a warrant to search my car without my permission." Officer Ethan Blackwood's face reddened further at the mention of constitutional rights. "Ma'am, you're in no position to be quoting law at us. Your behavior has been suspicious from the moment we arrived, and now you're being uncooperative. That gives us all the probable cause we need." Other customers at the gas station had begun to notice the commotion. A young man pumping gas at the next island pulled out his phone and began recording, while an elderly woman emerged from the convenience store and stopped dead in her tracks. The bright overhead lighting ensured that every detail was captured clearly on multiple devices. Donna Fletcher could no longer stand by as a passive observer. She burst through the station's front door, her voice carrying across the lot. "Officers, there's been a mistake. That's Mrs. Johnson. She comes in here all the time. She's never caused any trouble. She's married to someone high up in the military." Officer Lisa Campbell turned sharply toward Donna Fletcher. "Ma'am, return to the store immediately. This is police business, and civilian interference will not be tolerated." "But she's telling the truth," Donna Fletcher insisted, taking another step forward. "Mrs. Johnson is a pillar of this community. She runs the food bank, serves on 3 different boards, and her husband is some kind of general. This is completely wrong." The mention of military connections seemed to give Officer Ethan Blackwood pause for just a moment before his pride reasserted itself. "I don't care if she's married to the president. Right now she's acting suspicious, and we're going to handle this by the book." What was truly suspicious was how quickly this routine stop had escalated into a scene that seemed more suited to apprehending a dangerous fugitive than questioning someone about pumping gas. Amara Johnson remained on the hot asphalt, her red jacket now damp with perspiration, while she processed the surreal nature of her situation. Meanwhile, 5 states away, the emergency alert triggered by her specialized bracelet had already reached its first checkpoint. The device, standard issue for immediate family members of high-ranking military officials, had activated the moment her stress levels spiked beyond normal parameters. The signal had pinged off cell towers, satellite networks, and secure communication channels, creating a digital breadcrumb trail that was already being analyzed by military personnel trained to respond to potential threats against protected individuals. Officer Lisa Campbell completed her unauthorized search of the vehicle, emerging from the driver's side with theatrical disappointment. No open containers, but I found prescription medication without a proper label. She held up a small container that clearly displayed Amara Johnson's name and prescription information. "Those are my blood pressure medications, prescribed by Dr. Martinez at Riverside Medical Center," Amara Johnson explained, her patients wearing thin. "The label is clearly visible, and it matches the name on my driver's license, which you still haven't allowed me to show you." The prescription bottle represented another fabricated escalation in Officer Lisa Campbell's growing narrative of criminality. She tossed it back into the car dismissively and returned to where her partner stood over Amara Johnson. Officer Ethan Blackwood made the decision that would change the trajectory of his career and life forever. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for suspicious behavior, possible public intoxication, and failure to properly identify yourself to law enforcement." He reached for his handcuffs while Officer Lisa Campbell positioned herself to assist. The metallic click of the handcuffs closing around Amara Johnson's wrists seemed to echo louder than it should have under the bright gas station lights. The sound carried across the lot, reaching the ears of witnesses who would later testify about what they saw, heard, and recorded during those crucial minutes. As Officer Ethan Blackwood lifted Amara Johnson to her feet, she maintained her dignity despite the humiliation coursing through her. "Officers, you're making a serious mistake. I'm asking you one more time to allow me to contact my husband before this goes any further." "You can make your phone call from the station," Officer Lisa Campbell replied with dismissive authority. "Right now, you're coming with us." The patrol car's doors slammed shut with Amara Johnson in the back seat, her red jacket a stark contrast against the black interior. Through the window, she could see Donna Fletcher still standing outside the station, her phone pressed to her ear as she tried to remember the name of Amara Johnson's husband and how to reach him. What none of the officers realized was that contact had already been established through channels they couldn't imagine. The emergency alert from Amara Johnson's bracelet had traversed multiple security networks, triggering protocols designed to protect those with the highest levels of military clearance and their families. As the patrol car pulled away from Fletcher's gas station, leaving behind witnesses with phones full of video evidence and a gas station manager frantically making calls, the first military alert was already materializing on a secure terminal 5 states away. The name on the alert read clear as day: Amara Johnson, spouse of 4-star General Richard Bennett, Pentagon Strategic Operations Division. The officers who had just arrested her were about to discover that some mistakes have consequences that reach far beyond their small-town jurisdiction, extending all the way to the highest levels of military command, where the protection of service members' families is considered a matter of national security. In the back seat of the patrol car, Amara Johnson closed her eyes and took a deep breath, knowing that her husband's response to this situation would be swift, decisive, and absolutely devastating to everyone involved in her wrongful arrest. The Pentagon's 3rd floor hummed with its usual afternoon energy, fluorescent lights casting their harsh brightness across the polished corridors where America's military elite conducted the nation's most sensitive business. In his corner office, General Richard Bennett sat behind his mahogany desk, his muscular frame filling out his green military uniform as he reviewed intelligence briefings from 3 different theaters of operation. The 4 silver stars on his shoulders caught the overhead lighting as he leaned forward, completely absorbed in strategic assessments that would shape military operations across 2 continents. The emergency alert system's distinctive tone shattered his concentration like a lightning bolt through clear sky. Bennett's eyes snapped to his secure terminal, where a red priority message flashed with the urgency reserved for immediate threats to national security or military personnel. His training kicked in instantly, muscle memory from decades of crisis management guiding his movements as he entered his authorization codes. What appeared on his screen made his blood freeze in his veins. Emergency bracelet activation. Subject: Amara Johnson Bennett. Status: Code Red. Location: Millbrook, Tennessee. Threat assessment: active law enforcement engagement. The coffee mug in his left hand hit the floor with a crash that echoed through his office, hot liquid spreading across the pristine carpet as Bennett's mind processed the implications. His wife, the woman who had stood by him through 4 combat deployments and countless military relocations, was in immediate danger. The emergency bracelet he had insisted she wear, equipped with GPS tracking and direct Pentagon connectivity, had been activated under circumstances that triggered the highest level of military family protection protocols. Captain Sofia Alvarez burst through his office door without knocking, her orange military top visible beneath her regulation blue jacket as she clutched classified documents against her chest. Her normally composed demeanor showed cracks of urgency that Bennett had only seen during active combat situations. "General, we have confirmation of the alert," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Satellite surveillance shows your wife in custody of local law enforcement. The circumstances appear to be escalating beyond normal police procedures." Bennett's jaw tightened as he stood, his 6'3" frame radiating the controlled fury of a man who had led soldiers through impossible battles and emerged victorious. His calm exterior masked a rage that could move mountains and topple governments, the protective instincts of both a devoted husband and a military commander converging into focused determination. "Show me everything," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect from generals and presidents alike. Alvarez activated the wall-mounted screens that transformed Bennett's office into a command center rivaling any military operation. Satellite feeds appeared in real time, showing aerial views of a small gas station in Tennessee where his wife's emergency had begun. The images showed patrol cars, gathering crowds, and his wife being forced into the back of a police vehicle with her hands secured behind her back. The sight of Amara being treated like a common criminal sent a wave of protective rage through Bennett's system that he channeled into cold, calculated action. His wife, who had dedicated her life to community service and military family support, who had never received so much as a speeding ticket in their 22 years of marriage, was being transported like a dangerous criminal by officers who had no idea they had just triggered a military response that reached the highest levels of American power. "Activate Protocol 7, Bennett ordered, his words carrying the weight of federal authority. "Full spectrum response. Civilian protection priority. I want every available asset mobilized within the next 15 minutes. Protocol 7 had been implemented after September 11th to protect military families from threats both foreign and domestic, granting 4-star generals the authority to deploy federal resources when their families faced immediate danger. The protocol had been used fewer than a dozen times in its 20-year existence, reserved for situations where military families faced threats that local authorities could not or would not address appropriately. Alvarez's fingers flew across her secure tablet as she initiated the cascade of orders that would mobilize FBI agents, military personnel, and federal marshals across 3 states. "General, I'm showing federal agents already en route to the location. Agent Christopher Wade from the FBI's Civil Rights Division has assumed lead coordination for the civilian aspects of the operation." Meanwhile, 60 miles south of the Pentagon, Amara Johnson sat in the back of Officer Ethan Blackwood's patrol car as it wound through the streets of Millbrook toward the police station. Her red jacket had been disheveled during the arrest, her dignity intact despite the humiliating treatment she had endured at the gas station. The metal handcuffs bit into her wrists as she maintained the composure that had served her well as a military wife and community leader. "I need to contact my husband," she said for the 3rd time, her voice calm but insistent. "This is a misunderstanding that can be resolved with a simple phone call." Officer Lisa Campbell turned from the passenger seat, her short-sleeved uniform wrinkled from the physical altercation at the gas station. "You'll get your phone call when we get to the station, just like everyone else. Maybe your husband can post bail if you're lucky." The officers had no idea that Amara's husband was already mobilizing a federal response that would transform their quiet town into the center of a military operation. They couldn't know that their routine arrest had triggered satellites, activated emergency protocols, and set in motion a chain of events that would reach the desk of the Secretary of Defense within the hour. Back at the Pentagon, Agent Christopher Wade strode through the security checkpoints with the confidence of a man accustomed to high-stakes federal investigations. His muscular frame filled out his green top and blue jacket as he made his way to Bennett's office, carrying classified files that detailed the initial reports from the arrest scene. As one of the FBI's leading experts on civil rights violations and police misconduct, Wade understood the delicate balance between supporting law enforcement and protecting citizens from abuse of power. "General Bennett," Wade said as he entered the office, his voice carrying the gravitas of federal authority. "I've reviewed the preliminary reports from the scene. Based on witness statements and available evidence, this appears to be an escalation of a routine encounter that violated multiple federal statutes regarding civil rights and due process." Bennett studied the FBI agent with the analytical precision that had made him one of the military's most respected strategic thinkers. Wade's reputation for thorough investigations and unwavering commitment to constitutional rights had made him the FBI's go-to agent for sensitive cases involving military families and federal personnel. "What's your assessment of the local law enforcement response?" Bennett asked, his tone indicating that careers and federal funding could hang in the balance based on Wade's evaluation. "Problematic at multiple levels," Wade replied, consulting his notes. The officers ignored standard de-escalation procedures, fabricated probable cause for the arrest, and have refused to acknowledge your wife's requests for communication. The local police chief has been notified of federal interest in the case but has not taken corrective action. At the Millbrook Police Station, Chief Leonard Bishop paced behind his desk in his blue jacket, reviewing the arrest reports that had landed on his desk with growing unease. The details provided by Officers Blackwood and Campbell contained inconsistencies that raised red flags for someone with his 30 years of law enforcement experience. The description of Amara Johnson's behavior at the gas station didn't match the profile of someone engaged in suspicious activity, and the officer's justification for the arrest seemed thin at best. His concerns deepened when his phone rang with a call from the FBI requesting immediate information about the arrest of Amara Johnson. Federal interest in a routine arrest was unprecedented in his small town, suggesting that this case carried implications far beyond what his officers had reported. But Bishop faced the eternal dilemma of police leadership, caught between supporting his officers and acknowledging potential misconduct. His hesitation to take immediate corrective action would soon prove to be a career-defining mistake as federal agencies mobilized resources that would transform his quiet police station into the center of a federal investigation. Back at the Pentagon, Captain Alvarez coordinated with air traffic control as military helicopters received clearance for immediate deployment to Tennessee. The sight of military aircraft heading toward a civilian police matter would soon raise questions among local residents and media. But Bennett's authority under Protocol 7 provided legal justification for any federal response necessary to protect his family. "General, we have confirmation that the helicopters are airborne," Alvarez reported. "Estimated arrival time at the target location is 18 minutes. Federal marshals and additional FBI agents are en route by ground transportation." Bennett nodded, his strategic mind already 3 steps ahead as he considered the broader implications of the unfolding situation. The arrest of his wife represented more than a personal crisis. It highlighted systemic issues within American law enforcement that demanded federal attention and correction. His response would send a message that reached every police department in the country about the consequences of violating citizens' constitutional rights. As the patrol car carrying Amara Johnson pulled into the police station parking lot, she remained unaware that the most powerful military response in the region was converging on her location. The emergency bracelet hidden beneath her red jacket had already accomplished its mission, alerting her husband and triggering protocols that would soon transform her from victim to the center of a federal operation designed to protect military families from exactly the kind of injustice she was experiencing. The stage was set for a confrontation between local law enforcement operating outside constitutional boundaries and federal authority backed by military precision. Officers Blackwood and Campbell were about to discover that their routine arrest had triggered consequences that reached the highest levels of American power, consequences that would reshape their careers, their department, and their understanding of accountability in ways they never could have imagined. The machinery of federal justice was in motion, and Millbrook, Tennessee was about to become the center of a storm that would demonstrate the full reach of American military family protection protocols. The harsh fluorescent lights of the Millbrook police station cast unforgiving shadows across the booking area as Officer Ethan Blackwood guided Amara Johnson through the degrading process that had become routine for him. The overhead lighting buzzed with that institutional hum that seemed to echo off every surface in the cramped facility. Amara's red jacket, now wrinkled from her time in handcuffs, stood out like a beacon of dignity against the drab gray walls and worn linoleum floors. "Empty your pockets completely," Blackwood commanded, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he'd perfected over years of similar encounters. His long-sleeved uniform bore the crisp appearance of someone who took pride in his position, though the arrogance in his eyes suggested that pride had long since curdled into something darker. Amara complied with quiet grace, placing her wallet, keys, and phone onto the metal counter with deliberate care. Each movement was measured, controlled, refusing to give Blackwood the satisfaction of seeing her rattled by his treatment. The emergency bracelet on her wrist caught the light briefly before disappearing back beneath her sleeve. "I need to contact my husband," Amara said firmly, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of navigating military protocol and high-level social functions. "I have that right. You'll get your phone call when I decide you get your phone call," Blackwood replied, barely looking up from the paperwork he was fabricating. His pen moved across the forms with practiced efficiency, creating a narrative that bore no resemblance to the actual events at the gas station. Across the station's main floor, Officer Lisa Campbell sat at her desk under the same harsh lighting, typing her report with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her blonde hair pulled back in regulation style, and her expression carried the smug satisfaction of someone convinced she had done her job well. The lies flowed from her fingertips onto the computer screen with disturbing ease. "Subject appeared intoxicated and belligerent," she typed, pausing only to glance toward the booking area where Amara stood with obvious sobriety and composure. "Resisted lawful commands and exhibited suspicious behavior consistent with criminal activity." Chief Leonard Bishop watched the proceedings from his glass-walled office, his middle-aged frame hunched over reports that weren't adding up. His blue jacket hung on the back of his chair as he rolled up his sleeves and tried to make sense of what his officers had presented to him. The inconsistencies were glaring to anyone willing to look for them, but 30 years in law enforcement had taught him the delicate balance between supporting his officers and maintaining department credibility. The phone calls had started almost immediately after the arrest. First, it was the gas station manager asking questions about why they had arrested that nice lady who didn't do anything wrong. Then came calls from community leaders, local business owners, and residents who had heard about the incident through the small-town grapevine that moved faster than official reports. "Chief Bishop?" The desk sergeant's voice carried a note of uncertainty that made Bishop look up from the conflicting reports. "I've got an FBI agent on line 2. Says he needs to speak with you immediately about the Johnson arrest." The blood in Bishop's veins seemed to turn cold. FBI involvement in what should have been a routine arrest meant someone had made a catastrophic mistake. He picked up the phone with hands that weren't quite steady. "This is Chief Bishop." "Chief, this is Agent Christopher Wade with the FBI. I need immediate information about the arrest of Amara Johnson. What are the charges, and what is her current status?" The voice on the other end was all business, the kind of federal authority that could end careers and close departments. Bishop could hear the barely controlled urgency beneath Wade's professional tone, and it sent warning bells ringing in his head. "Agent Wade, I'm still reviewing the details of the arrest. My officers report suspicious behavior and possible intoxication, but I haven't completed my investigation." "Chief, I need you to listen very carefully. Mrs. Johnson is under federal protection protocols. Any mistreatment or violation of her rights will result in immediate federal intervention. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" The words hit Bishop like a physical blow. Federal protection protocols weren't something you stumbled into accidentally. They were reserved for individuals whose safety was considered a matter of national security. He looked through his office window at Amara Johnson, who stood with quiet dignity as Blackwood continued the booking process, and realized his department had just stepped into something far beyond their understanding. "I understand, Agent Wade. What do you need from us?" "Full documentation of the arrest, all reports filed, and immediate verification of Mrs. Johnson's well-being. I'm en route to your location with a federal response team. Do not allow any further processing until I arrive." 20 miles away, at the Regional Air Traffic Control Center, controllers were dealing with their own crisis. Unauthorized military aircraft were approaching Millbrook's airspace, and the normal channels of communication were being bypassed by federal override codes that hadn't been used in the region for over a decade. "Tower, We have multiple military helicopters requesting immediate clearance for Millbrook Municipal Airport," came the crackled transmission from the lead aircraft. "This is a federal priority operation under Pentagon Authorization Tango 7 Alpha." The controller had never seen codes like that in 15 years of managing regional air traffic. The authorization came with congressional-level clearance, the kind reserved for national emergencies or threats to high-level government officials. Whatever was happening in Millbrook had just escalated beyond anything their small town had ever experienced. Back at Fletcher's gas station, Donna Fletcher couldn't shake the image of Amara Johnson being forced to the ground by officers who seemed determined to find wrongdoing where none existed. The afternoon sun streamed through the station's windows as she picked up her phone and dialed the number for Channel 7 News. "Yes, I'd like to report a story," she said when the newsroom answered. "I just witnessed what I believe was a wrongful arrest at my gas station. The woman didn't do anything wrong, but the officers treated her like a criminal anyway." The reporter on the other end was initially dismissive. Wrongful arrest claims were common, and small-town police incidents rarely warranted major coverage. But as Donna described the scene, providing details about Amara's calm demeanor, the officers' aggressive behavior, and the complete lack of any justifiable cause for arrest, the reporter's interest sharpened. "Did you get any video of the incident?" "I didn't, but several customers were filming. I can give you their contact information." At the community center across town, Dr. Samuel Okafor was fielding his own series of phone calls. The elderly community leader's blue jacket hung perfectly pressed as he sat behind his desk, his gray hair and lined face reflecting decades of fighting for justice in a system that often seemed stacked against people who looked like him and Amara Johnson. "We cannot let this stand," he said to the group of community leaders he had hastily convened via conference call. "If what Donna Fletcher witnessed is accurate, we have a clear case of racial profiling and abuse of power." Dr. Okafor had built his reputation on holding officials accountable, but something about this particular incident felt different. The woman's composure under pressure, her clear articulation of her rights, and the officer's determination to pursue charges despite obvious lack of cause suggested layers of complexity that hadn't yet been revealed. "I'm organizing a peaceful demonstration for this evening," he continued. "We need to show the police department that the community is watching and that we won't tolerate this kind of treatment of our residents." Back at the police station, the first signs of the approaching federal response were becoming impossible to ignore. The desk sergeant fielded calls from reporters, federal agents, and increasingly agitated community members, while Officer Blackwood remained focused on his booking procedures, seemingly oblivious to the storm gathering around him. "Blackwood," Chief Bishop called from his office doorway. "I need to speak with you immediately." Officer Blackwood looked up from his paperwork, annoyed at the interruption. Amara Johnson stood quietly nearby, her red jacket now the most vibrant thing in the drab booking area, her bearing still reflecting the dignity that had impressed even the gas station customers who witnessed her arrest. "What is it, Chief?" "I'm trying to finish processing this suspect. We may have a problem with this arrest. I need you to walk me through exactly what happened at the gas station." For the first time since the incident began, Blackwood showed a flicker of uncertainty. Chief Bishop's tone carried implications that suggested serious scrutiny of his actions, something he had rarely faced in his career. Meanwhile, Officer Lisa Campbell finished her fabricated report and submitted it through the department's system, unaware that federal agents were already analyzing every word for inconsistencies and potential civil rights violations. Her confidence remained unshaken, built on years of similar incidents that had never resulted in serious consequences. Outside Millbrook, military vehicles had begun appearing on the main highways leading into town. Local residents noticed the unmarked SUVs and federal license plates, unusual sights in their quiet community that suggested something significant was unfolding. The cognitive dissonance was building to a breaking point. On one side, Two police officers remained convinced they had made a routine arrest of a suspicious individual. On the other side, federal agencies, military protocols, and community leaders were mobilizing response efforts typically reserved for threats to national security. Amara Johnson stood at the center of it all, maintaining her composure despite the degrading treatment, unaware that her emergency bracelet had triggered the most comprehensive law enforcement response in the region's history. The harsh fluorescent lights continued to buzz overhead as the first phase of what would become a federal incident continued to unfold, setting the stage for revelations that would transform not just her situation, but the entire town of Millbrook forever. The storm was gathering, and very soon, everyone involved would discover just how catastrophic their assumptions had been. The bright afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across the small town when the first helicopter appeared as a distant speck against the cloudless sky. Inside his Pentagon office, General Richard Bennett stood before a wall of monitors showing real-time satellite feeds of the police station where his wife remained imprisoned. The overhead fluorescent lights illuminated his green military uniform as he coordinated what would become the largest federal response the quiet town had ever witnessed. Captain Sofia Alvarez entered the command center, her orange military top crisp under her blue jacket, carrying updated intelligence reports. "Sir, the advance teams are 30 minutes out. Agent Wade's convoy just crossed the county line, and Colonel Hunt's helicopter is approaching the landing zone." General Bennett's jaw tightened as he watched another monitor displaying his wife's location within the police station. "What's the status of local air traffic control?" "They've cleared all civilian aircraft from the airspace. The town's emergency management system is overwhelmed. They've never seen a federal response of this magnitude." Captain Alvarez pulled up additional screens showing the convergence of federal vehicles from multiple directions. Back at the police station, Officer Ethan Blackwood sat at his desk under the harsh fluorescent lighting, his long-sleeved uniform showing sweat stains as he attempted to process the paperwork for Amara Johnson's arrest. His hands shook slightly as he filled out the fabricated charges, the weight of his actions beginning to settle in his mind. "Blackwood, you need to see this," Officer Lisa Campbell called from across the room, her voice carrying a tremor of uncertainty. She pointed toward the window where the first helicopter had become visible, its military markings clear even from a distance. The rhythmic thrum of rotor blades grew louder, causing everyone in the station to look up from their work. Chief Leonard Bishop, his middle-aged frame tense beneath his blue jacket, emerged from his office and walked to the large windows facing the town square. "What the hell is that?" Officer Blackwood asked, abandoning his paperwork to join his chief at the window. The sound multiplied as two more helicopters appeared, flying in precise formation. The military aircraft circled the town with the methodical precision that spoke of serious federal involvement. Chief Bishop felt his stomach drop as the reality of their situation began to crystallize. "Sir, we're getting calls from residents asking about the military presence," the desk sergeant reported, his voice strained. "Local news wants a statement." In the holding cell, Amara Johnson sat calmly on the metal bench, her red jacket wrinkled but her posture dignified. Through the small barred window, she could see the helicopters circling overhead. A slight smile crossed her lips. She knew exactly what those aircraft represented. Her husband's response capabilities were legendary within military circles, and she had just witnessed the activation of protocols reserved for the most serious threats to military families. The helicopters drew lower, their downwash creating dust clouds in the parking lot. Chief Bishop grabbed his radio with trembling hands. "Dispatch, I need you to contact the county sheriff and find out what federal agencies are operating in our jurisdiction." Before the dispatcher could respond, the glass doors of the police station burst open. Mayor Gloria Simmons, a woman in her 50s, wearing a red blouse and dark slacks, stormed into the main lobby. Her usually composed demeanor showed cracks of panic as she surveyed the chaos developing around her town. "Leonard, what in God's name is happening here?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise of the helicopters outside. "I've got federal agents calling my office, military aircraft over my town, and news trucks setting up across the street." Chief Bishop wiped sweat from his forehead. "Gloria, I think we might have a situation with the Johnson arrest." "What kind of situation requires military helicopters?" Mayor Simmons' voice rose as more aircraft appeared on the horizon. Officer Ethan Blackwood approached his chief, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. "Sir, maybe we should reconsider the charges against Mrs. Johnson." This response seems excessive for someone who was just acting suspicious at a gas station. "Excessive?" Chief Bishop turned on his officer. "Blackwood, excessive is what's happening outside. Those are federal helicopters circling our town because you arrested someone. What aren't you telling me about this woman?" Through the windows, they could see federal vehicles beginning to arrive. Black SUVs with tinted windows formed a perimeter around the police station, while unmarked vans positioned themselves strategically throughout the area. Agent Christopher Wade's convoy appeared at the end of Main Street, moving with the purposeful efficiency of a federal operation. Dr. Samuel Okafor, the respected community leader, stood in the town square wearing his blue jacket, watching the federal response with grave concern. Around him, other community members gathered, their faces showing a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Word had spread quickly about Amara Johnson's arrest, and now the military response confirmed their worst fears about what had transpired. "This is bigger than we thought," Dr. Okafor told the growing crowd. "A response like this doesn't happen for ordinary citizens. Mrs. Johnson is someone important, and our police department just made a catastrophic mistake." Donna Fletcher, the gas station manager who had witnessed the arrest, stood beside Dr. Okafor, still shaken by what she had observed. "I tried to tell them she wasn't doing anything wrong. They wouldn't listen. They just wanted to arrest her." Federal agents approached Dr. Okafor and Donna Fletcher, their professional demeanor indicating the seriousness of their investigation. "Ma'am, we understand you witnessed the arrest of Amara Johnson. We need your statement regarding the incident." Inside the police station, the chaos intensified as more helicopters joined the aerial presence. Officer Lisa Campbell watched through the window as federal agents established a command post in the parking lot across the street. "Chief, I don't think this is about suspicious behavior anymore." Chief Bishop's radio crackled to life. "Chief Bishop, this is Agent Christopher Wade, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm requesting immediate access to your facility and the release of Amara Johnson into federal custody." The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Officer Ethan Blackwood looked at his chief with growing panic. "Federal custody? Chief, what did we do?" Before Chief Bishop could respond, the radio crackled again. "Chief Bishop, you have incoming military personnel requesting immediate coordination regarding the detention of a protected individual." Mayor Simmons grabbed the radio from Chief Bishop's hand. "This is Mayor Gloria Simmons. I demand to know what federal agencies are operating in my town and why we weren't notified through proper channels." "Ma'am, this is Agent Wade. We're operating under emergency protocols regarding the unlawful detention of a 4-star general's spouse. Your cooperation is required under federal law." The words hit the room like a thunderbolt. 4-star general's spouse. Officer Ethan Blackwood felt his knees weaken as the magnitude of his mistake crashed over him. Officer Lisa Campbell gripped the edge of a desk, her face draining of color. "A general's wife?" Mayor Simmons whispered, the political implications racing through her mind. "Leonard, please tell me your officers followed proper procedure." Chief Bishop couldn't meet her eyes. The fabricated charges, the excessive force, the refusal to allow phone calls, every violation of proper procedure now carried federal implications that could destroy careers and cost the town millions in lawsuits. The sound of helicopters reached a crescendo as the largest aircraft yet appeared over the town. This helicopter bore the distinctive markings of military command, and it headed directly for the makeshift landing zone that federal agents had established in the high school football field. Amara Johnson heard the approaching aircraft and recognized the sound signature of her husband's command helicopter. Through her small window, she could see the organized chaos of the federal response, military precision in every movement, federal agents coordinating with local authorities, and media trucks arriving to document what would undoubtedly become a national story about police overreach and federal response. Dr. Samuel Okafor coordinated with other community leaders as federal agents, interviewed witnesses, and gathered evidence. "This is our chance," he told the assembled group. "For too long, we've seen incidents like this swept under the rug. But when you arrest a four-star general's wife on fabricated charges, the entire federal government responds." The largest helicopter touched down in the football field, its rotors creating a windstorm that rattled windows throughout the town. From the aircraft emerged Colonel Gregory Hunt, his muscular frame impressive in his orange military uniform, topped with a blue jacket. His presence commanded immediate attention from every federal agent and local official. Colonel Hunt approached the police station with military bearing, flanked by federal marshals and military prosecutors. His arrival marked the transition from local incident to federal case, with all the accountability and consequences that such elevation entailed. Inside the station, Officer Ethan Blackwood and Officer Lisa Campbell watched through the window as Colonel Hunt approached their building. The reality of their situation had become undeniable. They had arrested, humiliated, and falsely charged one of the most protected civilians in America. "Chief, what do we do?" Officer Blackwood asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chief Bishop looked at his officers, then at the mayor, then at the federal response visible through every window. "We cooperate completely and hope they show mercy." Mayor Simmons straightened her red blouse and prepared to face the federal officials. The political survival of her administration depended on how she handled the next few hours. Outside, Colonel Hunt reached the station's front doors, ready to demand answers and ensure accountability for the treatment of General Bennett's wife. The helicopters continued their aerial surveillance as the town transformed into a federal operation zone, marking the moment when local authority would defer to federal power and constitutional justice. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of the Millbrook police station as Chief Leonard Bishop paced nervously behind the front desk, his blue jacket already showing sweat stains despite the early hour. The sound of helicopters had been circling overhead for the past 20 minutes, and the radio chatter from dispatch painted a picture that made his blood run cold. Federal agents were requesting immediate access to his facility, and the Pentagon was demanding answers about an arrest that should have been routine. Officer Ethan Blackwood stood near the booking desk, his long-sleeved uniform wrinkled from the morning's activities, trying to maintain an air of authority even as uncertainty crept into his voice. "Chief, what's all this noise about? We arrested a woman for disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Standard procedure." Officer Lisa Campbell, adjusting her short-sleeved uniform shirt, nodded in agreement while reviewing the paperwork she'd hastily completed. "The charges are solid. She was acting suspicious at the gas station, refused to comply with lawful orders, and showed signs of intoxication. Everything's by the book." Chief Bishop wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, the fluorescent lights overhead casting harsh shadows across his worried features. Through the station's large front windows, he could see black SUVs pulling into the parking lot, their tinted windows reflecting the bright morning sky. "Something tells me this isn't going to be as simple as you both think." The station's main doors burst open with such force that the glass rattled in its frames. Agent Christopher Wade strode through the entrance, his muscular frame filling out a crisp green shirt beneath a blue tactical jacket, followed by 6 federal agents in matching attire. Their synchronized movement spoke of military precision and serious intent. The bright overhead lighting illuminated the badges and credentials they displayed, each one representing federal authority that superseded local jurisdiction. "I'm Agent Christopher Wade, Federal Bureau of Investigation," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I'm here on direct orders from the Pentagon to secure the immediate release of Amara Johnson. Where is she?" Chief Bishop felt his knees weaken as the magnitude of the situation crashed over him like a tidal wave. His mouth opened and closed several times before words finally emerged. "Agent Wade, we have someone by that name in custody, but there must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Chief Bishop," Agent Wade replied, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. "The only question is how quickly you're going to comply with federal orders, or whether we need to take control of this facility entirely." Officer Ethan Blackwood stepped forward, his chest puffed out in a display of misplaced confidence. "Now wait just a minute. We made a lawful arrest. This woman was disorderly, resistant, and clearly under the influence. She's been properly booked and processed according to state law." Agent Wade turned his attention to Officer Blackwood, his eyes narrowing as he studied the man's face with the intensity of a predator sizing up prey. "Officer Blackwood, I presume? Your name has already been flagged in our preliminary investigation. I strongly suggest you remain silent until you've had an opportunity to speak with legal counsel." The station's radio crackled to life, and dispatch announced that additional federal vehicles were arriving at the perimeter. Through the windows, everyone could see military personnel establishing a security zone around the building. The morning sunlight reflected off their equipment and vehicles, creating an almost surreal scene that transformed the quiet small-town police station into the epicenter of a federal operation. Heavy footsteps on the front steps announced the arrival of Colonel Gregory Hunt, his imposing muscular frame evident beneath his orange military uniform and blue command jacket. The silver eagles on his collar caught the fluorescent light as he entered, followed by two aides-de-camp carrying sealed document cases. His presence filled the room with an aura of military authority that made everyone instinctively straighten their posture. "Chief Bishop." Colonel Hunt's voice resonated with the kind of command presence that comes from years of leading soldiers in combat. "I am Colonel Gregory Hunt, United States Army Judge Advocate General's Corps. I carry direct orders from the Secretary of Defense regarding the unlawful detention of Mrs. Amara Johnson." Chief Bishop's face had gone pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he reached for a chair to steady himself. "Colonel, I assure you that my officers followed proper procedures. If there's been any misunderstanding..." "Misunderstanding?" Colonel Hunt's eyebrows rose as he opened one of the document cases. "Chief Bishop, your officers have arrested and detained the wife of a 4-star general without cause, falsified charges against a protected person, and violated multiple federal statutes in the process. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a federal incident of the highest magnitude." Officer Lisa Campbell's confidence began to crack as she looked between the federal agents and military personnel filling the station. Protected person? She didn't identify herself as anyone special. She was just some woman causing trouble at a gas station. Captain Sofia Alvarez entered the station at that moment, her orange military top and blue jacket indicating her Pentagon liaison status. She carried a leather portfolio that she opened with practiced efficiency. "Officer Campbell, Mrs. Johnson attempted to identify herself multiple times during your encounter. You refused to allow her to produce identification and ignored her requests to contact her husband." The morning light streaming through the windows illuminated classified documents as Captain Alvarez spread them across the booking desk. Each page bore official seals and classification markings that spoke to the highest levels of government involvement. "These are Mrs. Johnson's federal protection credentials, issued under Protocol 7 for immediate family members of senior military commanders." Chief Bishop sank into his chair as the reality of the situation overwhelmed him. His department had just arrested one of the most protected civilians in the United States military system. The implications for his career, his officers, and his town began cascading through his mind like an avalanche of consequences. "Where is Mrs. Johnson now?" Agent Wade demanded, his patience clearly wearing thin. She's in holding cell 3. Chief Bishop managed to whisper, pointing toward the hallway that led to the detention area. Colonel Hunt's jaw tightened as he processed this information. "You placed the wife of a 4-star general in a holding cell based on fabricated charges? Officer Blackwood, Officer Campbell, do you understand that you've just committed felonies under federal law?" Officer Ethan Blackwood's bravado finally cracked completely as the weight of his actions settled upon him. His voice came out as barely more than a croak. "We didn't know. She didn't tell us who she was." "She tried to tell you exactly who she was," Captain Alvarez interjected, consulting her notes. "According to witness statements from gas station manager Donna Fletcher and 3 customers, Mrs. Johnson repeatedly attempted to explain her identity while you escalated the situation unnecessarily." The front doors opened again, admitting Mayor Gloria Simmons, who rushed in wearing a red blazer over dark pants, her face flushed from running. She'd obviously been called from another engagement and was struggling to understand why federal agents had surrounded her town's police station. "What in God's name is happening here?" Mayor Simmons demanded, looking around at the federal agents and military personnel occupying her police station. "Chief Bishop, why are there helicopters circling our town?" Agent Wade turned to address the mayor directly. "Mayor Simmons, your police department has unlawfully arrested and detained Mrs. Amara Johnson, wife of General Richard Bennett, on fabricated charges. This constitutes a federal civil rights violation and an attack on military family security protocols." Mayor Simmons felt the blood drain from her face as she realized the political catastrophe unfolding before her. Her town's police department had just created an incident that would bring federal scrutiny, media attention, and potential lawsuits that could bankrupt their municipal budget. "I want Mrs. Johnson released immediately," Colonel Hunt commanded, his voice carrying the authority of decades in military command. "And I want the officers responsible for this incident placed under administrative review pending federal charges." Officer Lisa Campbell looked desperately at Chief Bishop, seeking some kind of support or guidance, but found only a man whose career was crumbling before his eyes. "Chief, what do we do?" Before Chief Bishop could answer, Agent Wade had already dispatched 2 federal agents toward the holding cells. "We're handling Mrs. Johnson's release ourselves. Your department has demonstrated that it cannot be trusted with basic civil rights protections." The sound of cell doors opening echoed through the station as Amara Johnson was escorted from the holding area by federal agents. Her red jacket was wrinkled from the ordeal, and her dignity had been tested, but she walked with the composure of someone who understood that justice was finally at hand. The bright fluorescent lighting illuminated her face as she emerged, showing no trace of defeat despite the humiliation she'd endured. Colonel Hunt stepped forward immediately, his military bearing shifting to one of profound respect and regret. "Mrs. Johnson, I am Colonel Gregory Hunt, and I am here on behalf of the United States Army to personally apologize for the treatment you have received. This violation of your rights and dignity is unacceptable and will be addressed through every available legal channel." Amara Johnson nodded graciously, her voice steady and clear despite the ordeal. "Colonel Hunt, I appreciate your swift response. I trust that appropriate measures will be taken to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Agent Wade approached with a respectful demeanor that contrasted sharply with the aggressive authority he'd displayed toward the local officers. "Mrs. Johnson, federal medics are standing by if you require any medical attention, and we have victim services coordinators available to assist you with any immediate needs." "Thank you, Agent Wade, but I'm primarily concerned with ensuring that the systemic issues that led to this incident are properly addressed," Amara Johnson replied, her gaze sweeping across the officers who had arrested her. There was no anger in her eyes, only a determination to see justice served appropriately. Officer Ethan Blackwood and Officer Lisa Campbell stood frozen near the booking desk, finally understanding the magnitude of their actions. They had arrested someone under direct Pentagon protection, falsified charges against a military family member, and violated federal civil rights statutes in the process. The careers they had built were now in jeopardy, and federal prosecution loomed on the horizon. Captain Alvarez consulted her watch and made notes in her official log. Mrs. Johnson, General Bennett is en route via military aircraft and should arrive within the hour. He's been coordinating the federal response from the Pentagon Situation Room. The mention of General Bennett's imminent arrival sent another wave of panic through the local officials. Chief Bishop realized that he would soon be facing a four-star general whose wife had been unlawfully arrested and humiliated by his officers. The prospect filled him with a dread that went beyond professional concerns. Through the station windows, the security perimeter continued to expand as additional federal resources arrived. Military police vehicles, FBI mobile command units, and Department of Defense liaisons had transformed the quiet town into a federal operation zone. The bright morning sunlight reflected off their official vehicles and equipment, creating a scene that would be remembered in Millbrook for generations to come. Mayor Simmons approached Amara Johnson with visible trepidation, her political instincts warring with genuine remorse. "Mrs. Johnson, on behalf of our town, I want to apologize for this inexcusable incident. We will cooperate fully with federal investigators and implement whatever reforms are necessary." Amara Johnson regarded the mayor with the measured gaze of someone who had spent years navigating complex political and military environments. "Mayor Simmons, I hope this incident serves as a catalyst for meaningful change in how your department treats all citizens, not just those with federal protection." Colonel Hunt closed his document case and addressed the room with military precision. "This facility is now under federal oversight, pending a complete investigation. Chief Bishop, Officers Blackwood and Campbell, you will remain available for questioning by federal investigators. Any attempt to leave the jurisdiction or interfere with this investigation will result in immediate arrest." The transformation was complete. What had begun as a routine morning at a small-town police station had become a federal incident involving the highest levels of military and civilian authority. The officers who had felt so powerful while arresting an innocent woman now stood powerless before the machinery of federal justice. As Amara Johnson prepared to leave the station that had held her unlawfully, the morning sun continued to stream through the windows, illuminating a scene that would reshape not only individual lives, but the entire community's relationship with justice and accountability. The thunderous roar of military helicopters shattered the afternoon calm as General Richard Bennett's aircraft descended onto the police station parking lot. The downdraft from the rotors sent papers swirling through the air and forced everyone outside to shield their eyes from the debris. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station's main conference room, every person present felt the weight of what was about to unfold. Officer Ethan Blackwood stood rigid against the far wall, his long-sleeved uniform soaked with perspiration despite the air conditioning. His partner, Officer Lisa Campbell, remained beside him, her hands trembling as she watched federal agents prepare the room for the general's arrival. The confident swagger they had displayed just hours earlier had evaporated completely, replaced by the dawning horror of men and women who finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. Chief Leonard Bishop paced nervously near the window, his blue jacket wrinkled from stress as he watched the military convoy establish a secure perimeter around his station. Mayor Gloria Simmons sat at the conference table, her red blouse now appearing almost prophetic as she frantically made phone calls to her political contacts. Each conversation ending with the same devastating news: no one could help her now. The conference room door opened with military precision as Colonel Gregory Hunt entered first, his muscular frame commanding in his orange uniform and blue jacket. Captain Sophia Alvarez followed immediately behind, her orange military top and blue jacket crisp, despite the long flight from Washington. Agent Christopher Wade positioned himself near the evidence table, his green top and blue jacket making him appear even more imposing as federal authority filled the room. Then General Richard Bennett stepped through the doorway. The four-star general's presence transformed the entire atmosphere. His muscular figure filled out his dress uniform with natural authority, each ribbon and star on his chest representing years of service to his country. His eyes swept the room with military precision, cataloging every face, every detail, every person who had played a role in his wife's ordeal. The controlled fury radiating from him was palpable, making even the federal agents straighten their postures instinctively. But when his gaze found Amara Johnson, everything else faded away. She stood near the far end of the conference table, her red jacket now wrinkled from hours of wrongful imprisonment. But her dignity remained completely intact. Their eyes met across the room, and the general's rigid military bearing softened for just a moment as relief washed over his features. "Richard," Amara said quietly, her voice carrying all the strength that had sustained her through this nightmare. General Bennett crossed the room in 3 quick strides, gathering his wife into his arms with the gentle care of a man who had feared he might never hold her again. The embrace lasted only seconds, but everyone in the room witnessed the powerful love between them, making the injustice of her treatment even more stark and inexcusable. "I'm so sorry," he whispered against her ear, his words meant for her alone but audible in the suddenly silent room. This should never have happened. Amara pulled back slightly to look into her husband's eyes. "I'm fine, Richard. But these officers need to understand what they've done." The general's expression hardened again as he turned toward Officer Ethan Blackwood and Officer Lisa Campbell. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Officers Blackwood and Campbell, step forward." Both officers moved like condemned prisoners approaching the gallows. Officer Ethan Blackwood's face had gone completely pale, while Officer Lisa Campbell looked as though she might be physically sick. They stopped 3 feet from the general, their training telling them to maintain some semblance of professional bearing even as their careers crumbled around them. General Bennett studied them with the same analytical precision he brought to military strategy sessions. "Do either of you understand what you've done today?" Officer Ethan Blackwood's voice cracked when he tried to respond. "Sir, we were just doing our jobs. We had no way of knowing." "Stop!" The single word cut through the air like a blade. "You had every way of knowing if you had followed proper procedures. My wife identified herself. She provided identification. She complied with every instruction you gave. She requested contact with her family, which you denied. She was respectful, cooperative, and completely innocent of any wrongdoing." Colonel Gregory Hunt stepped forward, opening a thick file folder. "General, our preliminary investigation shows these officers fabricated multiple charges. They claimed suspicious behavior where none existed. They alleged detecting alcohol when Mrs. Bennett had consumed none. They conducted an illegal search of her vehicle without consent or probable cause." Captain Sofia Alvarez added her own documentation to the growing pile of evidence. "Sir, the GPS tracking from Mrs. Bennett's vehicle confirms she was never speeding. The gas station security footage shows she was simply purchasing fuel when the officers arrived and immediately began escalating the situation." Agent Christopher Wade placed his laptop on the conference table, the screen showing frame-by-frame analysis of the arrest. The video evidence clearly demonstrates excessive force during the detention. Mrs. Bennett was forced to the ground, despite complete compliance with all verbal commands. General Bennett's jaw tightened as he watched his wife being manhandled by the 2 officers now standing before him. The muscle in his cheek twitched as he saw her face pressed against the hot asphalt, her hands cuffed behind her back, while Officer Lisa Campbell searched through her personal belongings. "Chief Bishop," the general said without turning around, How do you explain your officer's conduct? Chief Leonard Bishop stepped forward reluctantly, his blue jacket now completely damp with nervous perspiration. General Bennett, I want you to know that this department doesn't condone. I didn't ask what you condone. I asked how you explain it. The chief's mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. Sir, I reviewed their reports, and there were inconsistencies, but I trusted my officer's judgment in the field. Your officer's judgment. General Bennett finally turned to face the chief directly. Your officer's judgment resulted in the wrongful imprisonment of a United States citizen under Pentagon protection. Your officer's judgment triggered a federal response involving multiple agencies and compromised national security protocols. Your officer's judgment has exposed this department to federal prosecution and civil liability that will bankrupt this town. Mayor Gloria Simmons stood up from the conference table, her red blouse now clinging to her from stress-induced perspiration. General Bennett, I want to assure you that this town will take full responsibility for what happened today. We're prepared to make this right. The general's attention shifted to her with the same intensity he had focused on the officers. Mayor Simmons, making this right isn't something you can accomplish with a press conference and an apology. This is a federal civil rights violation. This is false imprisonment. This is deprivation of rights under color of authority. The Justice Department will determine what making this right actually requires. The conference room door opened again as Natalie Cross entered, her red professional suit and briefcase immediately identifying her as someone accustomed to high-stakes legal battles. The prominent civil rights attorney surveyed the room with the practiced eye of someone who had fought institutional racism in courtrooms across the country. General Bennett, Mrs. Bennett, she said with a slight nod, I'm Natalie Cross. I've been retained to represent Mrs. Bennett in the civil rights action that will inevitably follow from today's events. Officer Ethan Blackwood's legs nearly gave out as the reality of federal prosecution and civil lawsuit hit him simultaneously. Officer Lisa Campbell leaned against the wall for support, finally understanding that their actions hadn't just violated department policy, but had crossed into federal criminal territory. Natalie Cross opened her briefcase and extracted a thick legal document. I've already filed preliminary paperwork with the federal district court. The civil rights violations are clear and well documented. The damages will extend far beyond monetary compensation to include systemic reforms of this department's practices. General Bennett nodded approvingly. Ms. Cross, my wife and I appreciate your representation, but I want everyone in this room to understand that the federal response to this incident extends beyond civil court. Colonel Gregory Hunt stepped forward again. The Pentagon takes threats to military families extremely seriously. When Mrs. Bennett's emergency beacon activated, it triggered protocols designed to protect against terrorism and kidnapping. The resources deployed today exceeded $500,000. The compromise of operational security procedures has implications for national defense. Captain Sofia Alvarez consulted her tablet. General, we've documented 17 separate violations of federal law in the officer's conduct. The FBI's investigation will determine which charges to pursue, but the evidence is overwhelming. Agent Christopher Wade addressed the room from his position near the evidence table. Everyone involved in Mrs. Bennett's arrest and detention will face federal scrutiny. The department's practices, the chief's supervision, and the mayor's oversight will all be examined for patterns of constitutional violations. Chief Leonard Bishop's voice was barely audible when he spoke. General, what can we do to minimize the damage to our community? The general studied him for a long moment before responding. Chief Bishop, the damage to your community began when you allowed these officers to violate a citizen's rights. The damage continued when you accepted their fabricated reports. The damage escalated when you failed to investigate obvious inconsistencies in their stories. You don't minimize that damage now with political maneuvering. Amara Johnson stepped forward, her voice carrying the same strength that had sustained her through the entire ordeal. What happens next needs to ensure this never happens to anyone else. Not to another military spouse, not to any citizen who looks like me, not to anyone who can't trigger a Pentagon response. Her words hung in the air like a challenge to everyone present. Officer Ethan Blackwood finally seemed to understand that their victim wasn't just the wife of a powerful man, but a woman who had endured what countless others faced without recourse. General Bennett placed his hand on his wife's shoulder, the gesture both protective and proud. The accountability for today's actions will be swift, thorough, and public. Every person who participated in my wife's mistreatment will face appropriate consequences. Every system that failed will be reformed or replaced. Mayor Gloria Simmons made one last desperate attempt at damage control. General Bennett, this town has always supported our military. Today was an aberration, not representative of who we are. The general's response was delivered with cold precision. Mayor Simmons, who you are is exactly what we witnessed today. Two officers who felt comfortable fabricating charges against an innocent woman, a chief who trusted those fabrications over evidence, a system that processes citizens like criminals without basic respect for constitutional rights. That's who you are until you prove otherwise through sustained reform. Natalie Cross closed her briefcase with a decisive snap. The federal lawsuit will seek not just damages, but structural reforms. New training protocols, community oversight, independent investigation procedures, real accountability measures that protect everyone's rights. Colonel Gregory Hunt gathered his files. The Pentagon's investigation will be completed within 30 days. Our recommendations will determine whether this incident represents isolated misconduct or systemic problems requiring federal intervention. As the meeting began to wind down, General Bennett addressed the two officers one final time. Officers Blackwood and Campbell, you violated your oaths, betrayed public trust, and committed federal crimes. But more than that, you forgot that every person you encounter is someone's family member, someone's spouse, parent, or child. Today you learned that actions have consequences, even when you think no one important is watching. The general turned to his wife, offering his arm with the same courtesy he had shown her on their wedding day 20 years earlier. Mrs. Bennett, shall we go home? Amara Johnson straightened her red jacket and lifted her chin with unmistakable dignity. Yes, General Bennett, let's go home. As they walked toward the conference room door, followed by the federal agents and military officers, everyone remaining understood that this small town would never be the same. The reckoning had only just begun. The police station's main conference room had been transformed overnight into a federal command center. Bright fluorescent lights illuminating stacks of legal documents, federal badges, and the stern faces of justice finally being served. Colonel Gregory Hunt stood at the head of the table in his crisp orange military uniform and blue jacket, his muscular frame commanding absolute authority as he opened the folder that would end two careers forever. Officers Ethan Blackwood and Lisa Campbell, Colonel Hunt's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. You are hereby formally charged under federal statute with civil rights violations under color of law, false imprisonment of a protected individual, conspiracy to deprive constitutional rights, and filing false police reports with intent to deceive federal authorities. Officer Ethan Blackwood's face had drained of all color, his long-sleeved uniform now damp with perspiration as the weight of federal prosecution crashed down upon him. Beside him, Officer Lisa Campbell trembled visibly, her hands shaking as she realized that her fabricated arrest report had just become evidence in a federal criminal case that would destroy everything she had worked for. Agent Christopher Wade, his green top and blue jacket pristine despite the early hour, spread surveillance photographs across the conference table with methodical precision. These images show clear evidence of excessive force, illegal search and seizure, and deliberate escalation of a peaceful interaction. Every action you took violated Mrs. Bennett's constitutional rights and federal law. The conference room door opened with authority as Judge Margaret Lawson entered. Her red judicial robes flowing behind her like a banner of justice finally arrived. The respected federal judge surveyed the scene with decades of courtroom experience, her presence immediately elevating the proceedings from local police matter to federal case of national significance. "Your Honor," Colonel Hunt acknowledged with military respect, "the Pentagon has invoked its full legal authority in this matter. Mrs. Amara Bennett, wife of 4-star General Richard Bennett, was unlawfully detained, assaulted, and imprisoned by these officers despite committing no crime and posing no threat to public safety." Judge Lawson took her seat at the table, the bright overhead lighting reflecting off her glasses as she reviewed the charges. The federal government takes civil rights violations extremely seriously, particularly when they involve protected military families. These charges carry sentences of up to 10 years in federal prison, and I can assure you that this court will seek maximum penalties. Chief Leonard Bishop sat slumped in his chair, his blue jacket wrinkled, and his career effectively over, as federal investigators combed through years of his department's records. The man who had once commanded respect in this small town now faced suspension, criminal investigation, and the complete dismantling of everything he had built through decades of willful blindness to his officers' misconduct. "Chief Bishop," Agent Wade's voice held no sympathy, "our investigation has revealed a pattern of civil rights violations, falsified reports, and systematic discrimination that extends far beyond this single incident. You are hereby suspended from duty pending federal investigation into your department's practices and your personal culpability in enabling this culture of abuse." General Richard Bennett stood at the room's large windows, his imposing figure in full dress uniform silhouetted against the bright morning skylight as he watched federal agents continue their methodical documentation of evidence. When he turned back to face the room, every person present felt the full weight of his authority and barely contained fury. "Let me make something absolutely clear." General Bennett's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect from world leaders. "What happened to my wife represents everything wrong with unchecked authority and institutional racism. You officers saw a black woman and immediately assumed criminality. You fabricated charges, used excessive force, and violated every oath you swore to protect and serve." The security footage from the gas station played on multiple screens around the room, showing frame by frame how Officer Blackwood had escalated a peaceful interaction into violent arrest without cause. General Bennett provided military analysis of each violation, his trained eye highlighting tactical errors and constitutional violations that demonstrated clear malicious intent. Here, General Bennett pointed to the screen showing Officer Campbell's illegal vehicle search. "We see deliberate violation of Fourth Amendment protections. Here, he indicated Officer Blackwood forcing Amara to the ground. We witness assault under color of law." And here, the final frame showed Amara in handcuffs despite having committed no crime. We see the complete breakdown of justice that this federal response is designed to prevent. Natalie Cross, the renowned civil rights attorney in her sharp red blazer and dark pants, spread her own legal documents across the table with the confidence of someone who had won similar cases against much larger departments. Her presence in the room signaled that federal criminal charges were only the beginning of the consequences these officers would face. "The civil rights lawsuit I'm filing will restructure this entire police department," Natalie Cross announced with calm authority. "Mrs. Bennett will receive full compensation for her ordeal, but more importantly, this settlement will fund comprehensive police reform, bias training, community oversight, and victim support programs that will prevent future incidents." Officer Blackwood finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "We were just doing our jobs. We didn't know who she was." The room erupted in controlled but intense response from every federal official present. Colonel Hunt stepped forward, his military bearing making the disgraced officer shrink back in his chair. "That statement proves exactly why you're facing federal charges." Colonel Hunt's voice carried decades of military justice experience. "Mrs. Bennett's identity as a general's wife is irrelevant. Every American citizen deserves the constitutional protections you violated. You saw a black woman and immediately assumed criminality. That's not police work. That's racism with a badge." Judge Lawson's gavel struck the table with finality. "Officers Blackwood and Campbell, you are remanded to federal custody pending trial. Bail will be set at $500,000 each, and you are prohibited from any contact with witnesses, victims, or anyone involved in this case. Your police powers are permanently revoked, and you will surrender all department property immediately." Mayor Gloria Simmons entered the room at that moment, her red mayoral blazer and professional demeanor barely concealing her desperation to contain the political firestorm that threatened to consume her administration. She had spent the night in emergency sessions with city council members, federal representatives, and community leaders trying to navigate the crisis. "I'm announcing immediate emergency reforms to prevent any similar incidents." Mayor Simmons addressed the room with the careful tone of a politician whose career hung in the balance. "Dr. Samuel Okafor, our respected community leader, has agreed to serve as community liaison and police oversight coordinator. His office will have direct authority to investigate complaints and recommend federal intervention when necessary." Captain Sofia Alvarez, crisp in her orange military top and blue jacket, coordinated with federal agencies from her mobile command station that had been set up in the corner of the room. Her tablets and communication equipment maintained direct links to the Pentagon, FBI headquarters, and Department of Justice as the federal response continued expanding. "The Pentagon is working with the Department of Justice to ensure this town's police practices meet constitutional standards going forward." Captain Alvarez reported to General Bennett, "We're implementing federal oversight that will monitor all police interactions, require body cameras for all officers, and establish direct federal reporting for any civil rights concerns." Dr. Samuel Okafor entered the room, his dignified presence in his blue jacket bringing immediate credibility to the reform announcements. The elderly community leader had spent decades fighting for civil rights and police accountability, and his involvement signaled serious commitment to change. "I accept this position with the understanding that real reform requires complete transparency and community involvement." Dr. Okafor's voice carried the weight of decades fighting injustice. "Mrs. Bennett's ordeal will not be forgotten, and it will not be repeated. This community will become a model for constitutional policing and civil rights protection." As federal marshals led officers Blackwood and Campbell away in handcuffs, their careers destroyed and their futures defined by federal prison sentences, the magnitude of their miscalculation became crystal clear. What had begun as racist assumptions about a black woman at a gas station had triggered the full response of the United States military and federal justice system. Amara Johnson, still dignified in her red jacket despite everything she had endured, stood beside her husband as justice finally unfolded around them. Her ordeal had exposed systemic corruption, ended criminal careers, and initiated federal oversight that would protect countless future victims from experiencing similar injustice. The bright conference room that had witnessed decades of cover-ups and misconduct now hosted federal prosecutors, civil rights attorneys, and military officials committed to ensuring that constitutional rights would be protected and that no badge would ever again provide cover for racism and abuse of power. Judge Lawson's final words echoed through the room as she prepared the federal court system to deliver justice that had been delayed too long. "This case will serve as precedent for federal intervention in local police misconduct. Constitutional rights are not suggestions, and this court will ensure they are protected with the full authority of federal law." 6 months had passed since that fateful day at the gas station, and the bright morning sunlight now illuminated a completely transformed community. The police station stood as a testament to change, its walls freshly painted and its mission fundamentally altered under strict federal oversight. Where corruption once festered in the shadows, transparency now flourished under the brilliant overhead fluorescent lights that seemed to symbolize the department's commitment to operating in full view of the community it served. The morning briefing room buzzed with activity as the new police chief, Commander Marcus Thompson, a dignified black man in his crisp blue uniform jacket and dark pants, addressed his officers. His appointment had come through an unprecedented process involving community input, federal approval, and a recommendation from Dr. Samuel Okafor himself. The elderly community leader had insisted that real change required leadership that understood both justice and community needs. Remember, every interaction with the public is an opportunity to build trust, Commander Thompson told his officers, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned his position through merit and community respect. We serve this community, and that means treating every person with dignity and respect. The officers nodded, their faces reflecting a seriousness that would have been impossible under the previous administration. These weren't the same people who had once looked the other way when Ethan Blackwood and Lisa Campbell committed their crimes. Many were new recruits, carefully screened and trained under federal guidelines, while others were veteran officers who had undergone intensive retraining and psychological evaluation. Meanwhile, in a federal prison facility 2 states away, former officer Ethan Blackwood sat in his orange jumpsuit, staring at the concrete walls of his cell. His federal sentence of 8 years for civil rights violations, false imprisonment, and conspiracy had become a cautionary tale throughout law enforcement circles. Lisa Campbell, serving her own 6-year sentence in a separate facility, had become equally infamous as an example of what happened when officers fabricated evidence and violated constitutional rights. Back in the transformed town, the morning sun cast long shadows across the newly renamed Freedom Station, the gas station where Amara Johnson's ordeal had begun. The bright overhead canopy gleamed with fresh paint, and a bronze plaque near the entrance commemorated the events that had sparked nationwide police reform. Donna Fletcher, the gas station manager who had witnessed everything, now served on the town's newly formed Community Oversight Board. Her red uniform shirt, a symbol of the courage she had shown in speaking truth to power. At exactly 9 in the morning, a familiar black sedan pulled up to pump number 3. General Richard Bennett stepped out first, his muscular frame impressive even in civilian clothes, a green polo shirt and dark slacks replacing his usual military uniform. He moved around the car with military precision to open the passenger door for his wife. Amara Johnson emerged with quiet dignity, wearing a red blazer and dark pants, her presence commanding the same respect it always had. But now there was something more, an additional layer of authority that came from having survived injustice and transformed it into systemic change. Her emergency bracelet, the one that had triggered the Pentagon response 6 months ago, caught the morning sunlight as she stepped toward the gas station entrance. Donna Fletcher spotted them immediately and hurried over, her face breaking into a genuine smile. "Mrs. Johnson, General Bennett, welcome back," she said warmly. "I have to tell you, not a day goes by that I don't think about how you changed everything for the better." Amara smiled, placing a gentle hand on Donna's shoulder. "You were the one who had the courage to speak up when it mattered most. That took real strength." The 3 of them stood together under the bright morning sky, the gas station bustling with normal activity around them. But this wasn't the same place where injustice had once flourished. Federal funding had poured into the community, transforming not just the police department, but the entire town's approach to civil rights and community engagement. Across town, the new Community Justice Center stood as a monument to progress. The building's modern architecture and floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the commitment to transparency that now defined the town's approach to governance. Inside, Natalie Cross, the civil rights attorney who had represented Amara, worked from her regional office, her red professional suit a striking contrast against the bright white walls of her office. The settlement from Amara's lawsuit had exceeded $12 million, money that had been strategically invested in community programs, educational initiatives, and oversight mechanisms designed to prevent future injustices. Natalie had insisted that the settlement serve a purpose beyond compensation, transforming it into a foundation for lasting change. Mayor Gloria Simmons, who had managed to retain her position through genuine commitment to reform, stood at the podium of the new Community Justice Center's main auditorium. Her red dress complemented the bright stage lighting as she addressed a crowd gathered for the center's official dedication ceremony. The audience included federal officials, community leaders, and citizens who had lived through the transformation. 6 months ago, our community faced a crisis that could have destroyed us, Mayor Simmons said, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. Instead, we chose to let it transform us. We chose justice over convenience, accountability over comfort, and truth over silence. In the front row, Dr. Samuel Okafor sat in his blue jacket, nodding approvingly as the mayor spoke. The elderly community leader had become the town's unofficial moral compass, working tirelessly with federal oversight teams to ensure that reforms took root at every level of local government. His weekly community forums had become essential gatherings where citizens could voice concerns and monitor progress. The transformation wasn't limited to local government. The police department's new training facility, funded through federal grants, had become a model program studied by law enforcement agencies nationwide. Captain Sofia Alvarez, still serving as Pentagon liaison, but now also consulting on military family protection protocols, regularly visited to review the training programs and ensure they met federal standards. Colonel Gregory Hunt had presented the case to the Pentagon as a comprehensive study in civilian-military relations, demonstrating how federal intervention could protect military families while respecting local authority. The protocols developed from Amara's case now protected thousands of military families across the country, ensuring that emergency response systems could activate instantly when threats were detected. As afternoon approached, the scene shifted to the capital city, where a national conference on police reform was taking place in a convention center bathed in natural skylight. The main auditorium was packed with law enforcement officials, civil rights leaders, federal agents, and community organizers from across the country. On the massive stage, under brilliant overhead lighting, Amara Johnson stood at the podium, her red jacket and dark pants presenting a figure of quiet authority. "My experience began as a personal tragedy," she told the audience, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "But it became something larger because people of courage chose to act." From Donna Fletcher, who witnessed and spoke truth, to Dr. Samuel Okafor, who organized our community, to the federal agents who demanded accountability, the audience listened in rapt attention as she detailed not just her ordeal, but the systematic changes that had emerged from it. Behind her, a large screen displayed statistics showing how the town's reforms had reduced complaints against police by 93%, while increasing community trust measures to historic highs. "Real change requires more than good intentions," Amara continued. "It requires systems of accountability, community involvement, and the courage to confront injustice wherever we find it. My husband's position in the military gave me protection that many don't have. Our responsibility is to extend that protection to everyone." In the VIP section, General Richard Bennett watched his wife with obvious pride. Next to him, Captain Sofia Alvarez took notes for the Pentagon's ongoing study of the case, while Agent Christopher Wade represented the FBI's commitment to monitoring and replicating the town's success in other communities. The conference marked the launch of the Amara Johnson Foundation, a national organization dedicated to police reform and community justice. Federal funding, combined with private donations, had created an institution capable of supporting communities facing similar challenges while advocating for policy changes at the national level. As evening approached, the scene returned to the small town where it all began. The police station's evening shift change occurred under the same bright fluorescent lights, but with a completely different atmosphere. Officers greeted community members warmly as they passed on the sidewalk. Children played in the nearby park without fear. The transformation was complete and genuine. Commander Thompson completed his final rounds of the day, checking in with officers and reviewing community interaction reports. Every encounter with the public was documented, analyzed, and used to improve training and procedures. The federal oversight that had once seemed intrusive was now welcomed as a guarantee of continued progress. At the Community Justice Center, the evening programs were in full swing. Young people attended tutoring sessions funded by the settlement money. Adults participated in civil rights education classes. Senior citizens gathered for community forums where their voices carried real weight in local governance decisions. The bronze plaque at Freedom Station reflected the setting sun's golden light, its inscription serving as a permanent reminder of how individual courage could spark systemic change. The words were simple but powerful. Here, injustice met its match. Here, a community chose to transform rather than ignore. Here, change began. As darkness fell over the transformed town, lights blazed from every window of the Community Justice Center, the police station, and the mayor's office. The brightness symbolized the transparency that now defined every aspect of local governance. There were no more shadows where corruption could hide, no more whispered conversations about looking the other way. 6 months had proven that real change was possible when communities demanded it and federal oversight ensured it. Ethan Blackwood and Lisa Campbell's crimes had inadvertently triggered the most comprehensive police reform in the region's history. Their victims had become catalysts for justice that extended far beyond their own experience. The story that had begun with an unjust arrest at a gas station had evolved into a national model for community transformation. Amara Johnson's dignity under pressure, combined with her husband's federal authority and the community's courage to demand better, had created something unprecedented. A small town that had genuinely confronted its demons and emerged stronger. In cities across the country, other communities now looked to this transformed town as proof that systemic change was possible. Federal agencies studied its methods, civil rights organizations cited its success, and in police academies nationwide, the case had become required reading, a stark reminder of what happened when officers violated their oaths and constitutional principles. The transformation was complete, permanent, and powerful. Justice had not only been served, it had taken root and flourished, ensuring that Amara Johnson's ordeal would protect countless others from similar injustices for generations to come. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.